Today is going to be an exciting day. I say that because I'm actually recording this ahead of time. And when you are listening to this or the day it releases is the 4th of July, which is also my husband's birthday. So it is a very special day. And we have a lot of stuff that is planned that is going to be super fun. And I hope you enjoy the day as well. And celebrate my husband's birthday with some fireworks if you're in the US, I guess. But for our episode today, I actually want to talk about sinking funds. And when you are setting up your budget routine, you might ask yourself, how many sinking funds should I have? Is there a correct number or what should I be looking for? And that is what I want to talk about today. Well, first of all, what sinking funds are, if you want to consider those, and how to set them up and what you would even do with sinking funds. Like, what are they? What do they do? How many do I need? All the things. We're going to talk about it.
Are you ready to stop the chaos, the stress, the overwhelm that's filling your life? I'm Renae Matt, and together you and I are going to build simple routines that are going to change your life. When you put these habits into practice, you're going to be able to organize your life in a way where you can be there for your family, pay off your debt, save money, your house can stay organized, you don't have to stress about what's for dinner, and you still get time for yourself. So without further ado, let's get started. Welcome to the Routine Advantage Podcast.
Now, I get excited about talking about budgets. I'm one of those weird people that just really love budgeting. And I love it because of how much of a difference it has made in our life and how much it has impacted not only our financial position, but just the ease of life and the reduced stress and the plans that we've been put in place and just the bonding with my husband and I, like, it has changed our marriage and it just helps us be more of a partnership. And I cannot say enough good things about having a budget and doing it together. And that is such a good thing to implement if you are married. But even if you're single and you're doing this on your own, having a budget is just as important because it helps give you a plan for your money. It helps keep you organized and it just gives you some direction and it just helps everything. I just can't say enough good things about it. But one of the questions that might come up for you are about sinking funds and whether or not you need them, how many do you need? What are they? Like, you may have never even heard the term sinking funds. And I just want to go over that today because it is a very integral part of our budget that helps us reach the goals that we want to reach. And if you have been struggling with your budget or not really knowing how to like plan for specific expenses or big things are coming up and it's kind of throwing you off, this might be a really good solution for you depending on how it goes. So I want to talk to you about these things in case it's something you haven't considered before. So, first of all, what is a sinking fund? We'll cover that first. So, when you are setting up your budget, you have your monthly expenses and then you have your savings or sinking funds, and they're kind of separated. They're not in your day to day spending, it's money that has been set aside. And you might consider this your savings and an emergency fund, something like that. But an emergency fund and sinking funds are different things. So, your emergency fund is really like it's not your day to day spending. Is think about it. So, think about your checking, that's your day to day. And then think about your savings account is more for your emergency fund or your sinking funds. However, the funds that are in that account, whether it's, split by different accounts or it's all in one lump sum, the intention for the money that is in there, you need to have an emergency fund, which is only money that is set aside specifically for an emergency. Like, that is why it's titled that. It's not for saving a little bit and then spending out of it. It is set aside for emergencies as like your backup so that you can run day to day. And that is just a safety net if something were to happen where you would need a lump sum of money, or if for some reason, God forbid, you lost your job and you were out of an income, something like that, where it would help tide you by until you were able to get a new job or something like that. Like that is set up for emergencies. Maybe something happens in your home where all of a sudden you have this really big expense because a storm happened and, a branch went through your window and you need to replace the window. That would be an emergency fund expense where it's something that you didn't anticipate happening that you now need funds for. So that is the purpose of the emergency fund. The sinking funds, however, are setting the funds aside for a purpose and you expect to spend it on something specific. So you're actually allocating that money for something specific when it is set aside in a sinking fund because you're actually saving towards a goal and it's not set aside for an emergency that is in the future that you don't know what's happening. So they're a little bit different that way. And so you want to just make sure that you are saving for a specific one and you know what you're saving towards because the hard part with money, and especially if we're new to budgeting, if we just have one big, large lump sum in a savings account, we're going to look at that and see a huge balance and it's growing. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, let's go on a little shopping spree. We've got enough money in there. When if you don't have it like separated on a spreadsheet or on paper even or in like buckets within your checking account or your saving account, maybe you have different savings accounts for each one and you name them different things. However you do it, you need to know how much you have for the things you're saving for so that you don't feel like you have enough flexibility to start spending that money and then all of a sudden put yourself in a position where you have spent too much money and now an emergency does come up and you need that money. So you want to be really aware of what you're doing. And so that's why the purpose of budgeting and having it all broken down and having these goals set and sticking to the goals as best you can is so important and can get you so much further because you actually have a plan and it's clear for you and it makes it much easier to stick to your plan when you have that clarity around it. So that is the difference and why you might need one or do you need one, it's totally up to you and it depends on your life and I would say yes, you should have at least one sinking fund as like kind of a backup fund, but to break them down, that is up to you on how you want to do your budget. For Tony and I, we have found it easier for us to do very specific sinking funds and be really clear in what we're saving for. So we have many. I actually wrote them down for you, and we have 12, but I added two ideas that I think would be beneficial for other people that we don't have them because they don't apply to us. But I technically have 14 sinking fund ideas for you, and 12 of these we do. So if that gives you any indication on sinking funds, but you do not have to do the same number as we do. We do that because we have found over time and doing this more and more that it makes sense for us to do this many because we stay on track better. We prioritize our money better when we have it designated in such detail. So it's totally up to you on how many you want, but it is really nice to have that backup for bigger purchases, especially rather than doing it in your month to month. And the reason why is because what we were finding is when we were doing, our monthly budget and we would plan out for the month, we always had to adjust. So at the end of each month, the goal is to look at the month ahead, look at your calendar, look at your bills coming up, and to just adjust a template. And I have previous episodes that walk you through building your base budget and how to track your expenses once your base budget is built. You can go back and look at those episodes, and you can actually join our Facebook community. It's at facebook.com/groups/the routine advantage community. And when you join that community, pinned at the top of the group is an episode library. And you can open that up. It's a spreadsheet that has all of our previous episodes. And you can just use the search function to type in budget and all of our budgeting episodes will be highlighted and you can kind of pick through which ones that you want to listen to go through this whole process if you want to. But basically you are looking at the end of the month, you are looking at the month ahead, planning for it. You have a template that makes it super easy so you're not starting from scratch every month. You're planning ahead. And what we were doing is usually it's like little tweaks. But before we started sinking funds, they were these bigger purchases that would come up, whether it was we needed to replace a lot of our clothes, we needed to replace shoes, just $100 pair of shoes to replace like running shoes or something, that you want those good quality shoes. And a lot of times I think our running shoes are usually like $140 a pair, so it's not astronomical, but when you're budgeting and you have multiples of these bigger purchases that weren't initially accounted for, they can throw off your budget and how much you were planning to save and all of that stuff. And that's kind of what was happening. So that was happening. And then, we have a really big family, and a lot of times we do like going in on gifts for each other. But because there's so many people, it happens several times throughout the year where all of a sudden this big purchase comes up and we wanted to contribute, and it would kind of throw off our budget there. And sometimes we wouldn't know, the month before when we were planning out our budget. So it was mid-month and then we get asked this, and it needs to happen before we have time to adjust our next month's budget. So that's what was happening for us. So over time we realized like we need to have some money set aside where when these things come up, it's not going to throw off our budget so much. And that is when we kind of began adding additional sinking funds. And we started small. We started with just a couple, and we only plugged in a little bit in each one, because at that time we were still growing and learning how to do everything. And now we have gotten it where we live on a very small percentage of our income because we're putting so much into savings. We're trying to save for a new house so that we can get more land, or we can get land. We have like nothing. It's a very small lot that we're on right now. So we're saving for that. We are putting money into these sinking funds. Even if it's just a tiny bit into each one each month, it is something, and it's building so that we have some money set aside. So the purpose of having it, and whether or not you want them, is to really think about what throws off your budget each month. What are you spending money on that feels like it's really giving or like taking a hit on your finances each month? Those are probably the bigger things that you're going to want to start a sinking fund for, because you are able to then put it aside and plan for it for a longer period of time, where it's not like all of a sudden you have an annual insurance payment due. Obviously, it's annual, it comes once a year, but rather than just all of a sudden being like, "Oh shoot, that's due now," and having, some big balance that is due on the spot and you kind of forgot about it until just now, you actually plan for it and you take a little bit out each paycheck or each month or however you have it broken down, where you have it divided up and you take a little bit out each month or each paycheck and just plug it into this sinking fund so that when it comes time for your annual insurance payment, you have that bulk sum already set aside. It doesn't stress you out. All you have to do is pay it from the sinking fund and then keep going and saving for the next year. When you can break it down into so many smaller balances where you're just plugging a little bit of money aside, you don't really feel it as much, and you don't feel the weight of the cost and the stress of the financial position that it puts you in, because you've already prepared for it, you've planned for it, and it just makes life so much easier, and you don't have to stress about those big costs. So, how many you should have, like I said, totally depends on your life. And the first thing I want to say is, first and foremost, you want to start with an emergency fund. If you follow Dave Ramsey, that's what my husband and I went through to get out of debt and to kind of learn our whole budgeting process. We started with Dave Ramsey's baby step program, and it was phenomenal. It got us out of debt faster than we had anticipated, and it was so good. And I believe it was episode 7 that I talk about our story and helping you build your base budget there. And don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure it's episode 16 that then helps you um go through and track your expenses once you have your base budget built, if you want to go back and listen to those episodes. But what we did is we had followed that program, and the first thing was to build $1,000 emergency fund. And $1,000 is does not feel like enough because it's like, well, an emergency will probably cost more than $1,000. But the whole purpose is that you only have the $1,000 while you're paying off your debt. And it gives you a little bit more of a boost because you're not incurring any more debt. You're getting rid of your credit cards and everything, and you're not incurring any more debt. So you don't have credit cards as a backup. So it really pushes you to get your debt paid off as quickly as possible. And going through that program, they offer so many like ideas on ways to increase your income or add additional like side hustles, trying to get this paid off quickly so that you can then be out of debt and start raising your emergency fund and saving for additional things and going through the baby steps. It is a fantastic program if you have not done it yet. But basically, you just want your emergency fund first. If you follow that program, it's going to be $1,000. And then you try and build that $1,000 as fast as you can if you don't have it yet. And then you go to pay off your debt. Once your debt is paid off, you then build your emergency fund to a 3 or 6 month fund. So basically, if you do your budget template and you build your base budget, and let's say, like, for example, you know that all of your monthly bills on your template are going to cost, like, a random number is $3,000. Let's say that is your monthly bills. You know you need $3,000 to survive, to make sure your mortgage is paid, all your utilities are paid, your groceries, gas. You have enough money to get through a month if you make $3,000. So to do a 3 month emergency fund, you need to have $9,000 built up in the emergency fund, because then if something big and catastrophic happens where all of a sudden you need to survive without income for 3 months, you can do that. If you build it to a 6 month and you need $3,000 per month, that puts you to $18,000. Now, these numbers might sound really crazy high and scary, but the whole process of the program is to start at step one and focus on step one until you move through, and to focus on those baby steps. So don't look at the future big picture if it's overwhelming. Stick to the very first step and focus on that and work through it and get to the next step. And it sounds very undoable in certain circumstances. I know it scared me when we first started, but once we actually started with the steps, it was crazy how much of a difference you can make when you have a plan. So you want to make sure that your sinking fund is set up, and then decide what or I'm sorry, you want to make sure your emergency fund is set up and then decide what your sinking funds will be. Because if an emergency happens, you don't want to be having all of your money in sinking funds. If an emergency happens, you want to have that emergency fund set aside. And for the sinking funds, if you have these expenses that are coming up that you can prepare for, you don't want to be taking that out of an emergency fund. So they are two different things. But for your sinking funds, some ideas for you. So, number one would be annual taxes. If you are expecting a tax bill, you want to kind of estimate how much you're going to have to pay in taxes, and start that so that you have all year long to start plugging a little bit of money in and preparing for that payment. Number two is an annual insurance payment. A lot of times you can get a discount if you pay annually. So if you want to do that, then plug in a little bit each month so that you can pay it in full without any pressure when the time comes. Number three is a vacation fund. If you do any family vacations, big or small, having money set aside for that is awesome. So that would be another idea. Number four is home repair and maintenance. So these are those little trips to, a home goods store or a Home Depot or Menards. I don't know what home improvement stores are near you, but any type of home improvement store that you go to, that, something broke in the sink, something needs to be replaced with the washing machine. If what happened to us, our basement kind of partially flooded and we needed to go get so like a shop vac and some supplies and stuff at one time. All those little things that just all of a sudden pop up that are extra expenses. This is a fund for those types of things. Number 5 is vehicle repair and maintenance. Same concept is when something happens to your vehicle, you have money set aside for that. Number 6 is a new vehicle woo, I can't talk. A new vehicle fund. And this is for replacing your vehicle so that if something were to happen to your vehicle, you have a little bit of money set aside to be able to purchase a new vehicle if needed. No, or if you're saving for a dream vehicle, who knows? Number 7 is a Christmas fund. If you do Christmas shopping, it can throw off your budget big time, especially if you have a large family or if you have kids that you end up buying more expensive gifts for. That can be a big dent, plus the decorations, plus the events and extra cookies and baking supplies, all the things can really throw it off. And I actually do have an episode back, you'll have to scroll back, but it is an episode about saving for a Christmas sinking fund and setting yourself up for success for the following year. And that will be really helpful for you to break things down if you need to, but that is a Christmas fund. Number 8 is a dates and social life fund. If you find that you like doing some dates and doing some different events and activities that sometimes cost some money that you didn't plan for in your budget, having a little bit of money set aside as like a little overflow budget for some dates or like impromptu dates is really helpful. Number 9 is health and fitness expenses. This again, like I was talking about with the shoes. My husband always needs running shoes, and I need good gym shoes. I don't I don't run, but I need good gym shoes and he needs running shoes. And so when we are needing to replace those, it's not going to throw off our budget when we have that. We also do a lot of supplements and vitamins, things like that that end up adding up to a good chunk of money. And having some money set aside in a sinking fund allows us to have that money when we need it. The next one is number 10, and that is a charity and giving fund. So I had kind of mentioned this before, where if you have uh, something come up where you want to donate to maybe like a GoFundMe, or if you want to give somebody a gift or go in on a gift with somebody, if something happens to someone and you want to give a donation or you want to go buy them groceries, things like that, these would be coming out of your charity and giving fund because you have money set aside for that and it's not coming and throwing off your monthly budget because it's not coming out of that. Number 11 is a clothing fund. So I have talked about this in episodes past, but a clothing fund is what we do. You could have one for your whole family, but Tony and I, we actually split it and we have our own clothing fund. Just a little bit gets put in there each month for each of us and it gets divided evenly. And when we buy clothes for ourselves, then it just comes out of that sinking fund. And then we have a balance. So when we're wanting new stuff, we can take a look. Like Tony often asks me, what do I have in my clothing fund? And I will take a look because I kind of take care of all of the budgeting on my side. And then we work together doing it, but keeping track of everything is actually what I do. And so he usually will ask me what is in there, and I can tell him exactly how much he has in his clothing budget. So then he can do his online shopping or go stop at a store and know exactly how much he has to spend. And it will just keep building slowly until we're ready to, get new clothes. Um, Number 12 is vet services. We have a dog, we have some expenses with him, and so that is another thing that we just plug in a little bit each month so that we are prepared if anything should happen or if something comes up and we need to buy him some extra stuff that is not in our monthly fund. And so those are the ones that we have. It's a lot of them, but they're very helpful even if it's just a little bit each month that it builds. And the other two that I had mentioned that I think could be helpful if this applies to you is a back to school fund. If you have kids and school supplies and all that stuff that is associated with back to school tends to be really heavy on your budget, then that is a really good time to have a sinking fund for those things so that they don't stress you out when that time comes and you already have that money set aside for back to school. And then the other one was field trips or family activities. I know when you have kids, things cost more. Maybe you want to go on a trip to the zoo or an aquarium, or there are field trips that are in school and you want to send them and it costs money to do anything, then you can have that money set aside without it affecting your monthly budget. So, those are some of the ideas. I think that having sinking funds makes so much of a difference that I would encourage you to explore this option. But first and foremost, you want to make sure that you have your monthly budget set up and get your emergency fund plugged in. And then once you do that and you're feeling good about that, like I said, I highly encourage you to go to Dave Ramsey and follow his baby step program. It's all free resources on that page. He has so many resources through his company that walks you through exactly how to do it. There's a lot of support there. But that's what you'd want to do. And then once you have your monthly budget and your emergency fund in place, then you can explore with the sinking funds and they can be so incredibly helpful. So I hope that is beneficial to you. I hope it gave you some ideas and some encouragement, especially if budget routine sounds intimidating to you. It's so good. That's just what I'm going to be saying on all of my budget episodes because it's just amazing. So, I hope that was helpful for you. If you have questions or you need to have some ideas thrown around, feel free to join us in that Facebook community that I had mentioned earlier. If you do have questions, you can also email us. It's in the show notes. And if you have a minute or two, I would absolutely appreciate if you left a review for the show. It will be so much appreciated. And if you are on Apple Podcasts, you can actually write a written review so we can see what you say. Or you can actually go to speakpipe.com/theroutineadvantagepodcast and you can leave us an audio review or ask a question there. Lots of options, but you can do whatever your little heart desires. And I will see you on the next episode.
Did you love that episode or learn something useful? If so, would you do me a huge favor? My goal is to grow this podcast and help as many women as I can break free from the overwhelm so they can truly enjoy their life. The best way for me to do this is for you to leave a 5-star written review on your podcast app and to share this episode with a friend or in your Instagram stories. I appreciate you being here. I hope you have a wonderful day and I will see you on the next episode. Take care.